All right, let's go. Congratulations getting to the end. You've got me. You're stuck just for a little bit. I got 3 chickens. It's a talk with 3 chickens. 1 to cross the road, 1 to cross all of reality, and the 3rd's just going to cross a line. And that's it. All I need you to focus on or stay kind of in touch with is 2 chickens. Everything after that is just extra, right? So you can kind of clock out, not leave, but check out after the 2nd chicken. And there's just one other thing. Suspend disbelief, but also suspend belief, because I'm not really here to tell anyone anything. I'm just kind of making myself a point of observability. I'm making myself a point of communicability, and I'm making myself subject to the externalities of everyone in this room. That's pretty much it. So let's go. Let's play. So I'm going to start with everything about me. Why not? People start talks like that. It's all about them. So who am I? I'm Stephen Costa. That's just a person born with a name. I'm also Stalin. I picked that when like year 8, a long time ago. That was my gamer name, Dungeons and Dragons, all that, but it's stuck with me. So I identify sometimes in some places like that. But I'm all bigly about some stuff. Link Digital is my company I started 25 years ago. CCAN is a project I've been involved in for now, I think, 14 years. And it's a really cool open source project that does data portals. My company manages DataGov.eu and a bunch of others in different places. And I'm also, well, obviously, bigly about open data. And I didn't really know why. I did economics at school. I know what a non-rivalrous information good is. And I built stuff with technology, so data was always a driver of great websites, great things, right? You need data to have really cool stuff. But, I'm not just that person. I'm that person then, when I was just talking about it, but I'm also that person now, but I'm also going to be that person coming up, right? So everything about me is like this past, present, and future, but kind of like there's always more. There's always more. If I'm honest, which I hope lots of people here would be, because that's what we're all about. I'll not do that again. I can learn, I can grow, I can be wise, but I still make mistakes. There's this DNA replication thing where somewhere between Control-C and Control-V, there can be mistakes. So if I'm honest, I would also say I'm a massive optimist. You'll probably get a bit of that from today, but thankfully I'm also privately a massive self-critic, which keeps me a little bit level, right? I'm open and I have the receipts. I've gone through this sort of world of openness for a long time, and I think maybe folks might relate to some of this where people assume you've got an agenda, but people in the open community don't always have to assume that. Sometimes you just got to hope and maybe a clue, right? And that's all I need. I love meeting awesome people, and I have a little bit of that. I met Donna actually Munich 2012, I think, at DrupalCon, but I can't really hang with them. I have this problem, they inspire me too much, and then I get kind of absorbed by that. So I have to kind of spend my time getting inspired by little doses and then spending a lot of time by myself. So anyway, that's just me, but it's really not about me at all. It's, pretty much all at once, now and next. It's the externalities that define me. So here I am, everything open, right? With my company and the stuff that I do, the stuff I'm bigly about. It's my staff, it's my clients, it's the communities I'm involved in, open communities. But there's always more. There's always more that's not about me. And it's always not about me. So now it's everything open. Next, it'll be everything open, staff, clients, community. So it's always not about me. And not only that, when you really think about it, everything open and everything opening. So there's this emergence. So everything is emerging about me. And it's always all at once. So what does it turn into? Friends everywhere. Wonder where that's from. Anyway, I kind of feel like once you define yourself by your externalities, once you're open and observable amongst those, once you make yourself communicable and you're transacting on a daily basis on a cadence of mutual understanding between folks or things, you can select open despite the cost of being vulnerable, despite the checks and balances of that external pressure, and also despite the exclusivity allure. We select open. And I'd like to think there's a whole bunch of people here like that, right, that can relate. And I'd like to think that we're select to be here because openness actually defines us. It gives us our autonomy. It creates a barrier to what we don't want to be, which might be closed. In fact, that's the kind of, the no kings kind of thing. It's like we select to filter out the allure of invincibility. We select to drop the hidden cost of exclusivity. So it's time for a chicken. Who is willing to be a little bit open and take a question from me? Who is the kind of person who puts their hands up? So I'm going to throw to the inverse density of hands. So who doesn't want it? I'm going to throw it over there. I think that was one of the first ones. Okay, coming up. Participation. Okay, imagine you're me, 2001, I'm about to start my business, but it's not me, it's you. It's always you. So picture this, it's November 2001 and you're standing across the road from some government offices, ready to cross the road and register your business. Why do you cross the road? You won't guess, so just guess. Well, yeah, that could be it, and that maybe is it. But really it's just metabolic loading. I mean, you had chicken power.
Because it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sorry, yes. Metabolic post-loading. But yeah, you had chicken power. That's basically why you crossed the road. In fact, it was the eggs, not so much the chicken. But that gets us to the next problem, right? We're getting towards the second chicken in a bit. So do hang on to this bit, right? Was it the chicken or the egg that gave you the power? And you can relax now, there won't be any more questions. So it's a bit like my definition of why I have a boundary and why I think that my openness defines me, but it's really not about me, it's about everyone else. So those I'm open to, like all of you, are they the ones that get the credit? Or those like who are open like me, like do I get the credit? But they're pretty much the same thing. So which is it? Is it the chicken or the egg? So how do we give credit when we are all of us, everything open, everywhere all at once? So let's do the philosophy. Why not? So what is an egg? What is a chicken? And obviously I'm picking these things as just ontological thingamajigs. But a bit like I was just talking about before about myself, there's always a shadow egg to an egg. There's always a shadow chicken to a chicken. All the things that are not chicken are the chicken as much as the chicken is the chicken. And this is what we are stuck with, right? This is our reality. They and us too dance between ontology and epistemology. And I think being open is acknowledging that reality. It's acknowledging that what is not the same as what is known. But there is a relationship between those two things. So remember ontology, what is, epistemology, and also orthogonal. I grew up always saying orthogonal, so if I do that, I'm sorry. Because we're coming up to that. So egg, chicken, dark, light, what is it? But when it's chicken and egg, it's a bit more dynamic, right? There's some real dynamism there. So you have a shadow chicken egg, you have a shadow egg chicken, because you've got to remember, like there's an egg, there's a chicken, then there's another egg, and this inversion of causal maybes creates this idea, well, is this one a little bit not like an egg? Is this one a little bit more like a chicken? And there's a pole that can be created, which is defined by the shadow chicken egg and the shadow egg chicken. So definition of state is simply how coherence reveals itself. Difference is not division, it's the order depth of variant state dynamics. Variant states define the full chicken egg autonomy as emergent invariance. So imagine that last picture, but we're going to wrap it up in a little bit of an egg type graphic, right? So this is a superposition of chicken egg where there's an up chicken egg, down chicken egg with all the shadows and all that stuff. It's a polar, but we're still thinking, what the hell is going on between the chicken and the egg and the chicken and the egg? And there's causal set dynamic, which has a pole where there's an up and there's a down. Something is going to be positively going in that direction, right? Causally, structurally, impactfully. But at the same time, well, there's probably some sort of causal relativity. So wouldn't there be something negative coming the other way? And this is it, states, update, and nothing invariant matters. Only the optimization of state matters. So what does that mean? Well, that's after the second chicken. There's math. Objectivity. Now, what are we? We're the ones in the audience right now talking about crazy chickens, dark chickens, chicken eggs, all the sorts of stuff that might be going on in the world that defines us here today, everywhere, always. Our objectivity needs to be orthogonal to that, right? Did I do it? Orthogonal. Damn it. Anyway, objectivity is orthogonal. We have to step back and have some sort of like plane upon which we can have like an entangled view without touching the causality, this delicate dance of chickens and eggs and nothing in between. So this causal dynamic is part of the thing itself. If you get entangled with it, if you become part of the coherence of this causal chain, we've got to watch out for that. Could be a trick. So, getting to the second chicken pretty soon. What this means, if you're all with me, which I'm hoping you are, I am, you are, we are. Everything open, chicken eggs. All at once, everywhere. Nothing but that, right? That's us. And the second chicken. So, who's with me? That's what I want to hear. Who's with me? Is that where we are? Can I get a hell yeah? Can I get a clock? All right, I heard some sound over there. Oh, whoa, that was too hard. All right, I'm sorry about that. I haven't practiced throwing the chicken eggs. I should have lobbed it. It didn't have enough mass. But they are soft. And they're dog toys. So sorry for all the cat people. You can't, if you go shopping for chickens, by the way, there's not so much for cats. So I got a theory, right? Now you can kind of cluck out. You don't have to. It'd be really cool because I'm here subject to your externalities. I really want feedback. I want a conversation. And I will try and pay attention to time. 13 minutes, this is tops. All right, here's my conjecture. We live in a von Neumann auricular automata. What does that mean? Well, I'm just going to throw it out there. The chicken is the hardware. The egg is the software. And emergence is the compute. So emergent optimism is essentially addressable geometry via triangulation and variant state switching. Coherent causal history provides metabolic offload and just-in-time universal knowledge. You only need to know what you need to know, which is your boundary condition of self and your causal entanglement with a coherent greater self, right? The superset. What else do you need to know? So, we're all living in a computation, not a simulation, a computation. That's a bold claim. Maybe I'll have to get to the bold whatevers that come after that. So under the hood of all this is this geometry of optimism. I've written about it. I use this dialectic thing like this Laplace's demon, where there's a demon, there's an angel that represents constraint. What's the minimum way by which a causal thing becomes bifurcated such that it can define zero, such that the angel provides the constraint to define zero, definitely. You're always going to be at zero. And once you've done that, how do you get the next variance? And once you've got variance, how do you know that the variance that's next is the right kind of event? So what's k plus 1 for any number from 1 to k? And that's what we're going to get to. But before that, whatever this slide is, I can't remember. Oh yeah, but wait, there's causal history. Of course. God, I'd made that. I should remember that. So there's something coming up. There's something here that I think is really kind of cool for math people. The reason why I'm here has a long, long history. I'm like 53 soon, next month. But you don't want to hear it all. The TLDR is that everything ever has defined my autonomy and my selection to be here today and to talk about this stuff, right? But if not for maybe 1 or 2 or some number of tosses of some coins somewhere, who'd know? That's something to think about, right? Now, to say a little bit about why I'm here, which gets back to CCAN as an open source product, which gets back to being all bigly about open data. I do care about the role of data in shaping or supporting social reasoning. So we have systems, we have institutionalized organizational systems, we have processes that we engineer to do procedural reasoning. We have all sorts of systems for that, but we always still rely on social reasoning in different group dynamics, in political cohorts, just in rooms like this. You walk out, everyone say, what do you think of that? So how does data shape that? And how does it proactively, causally, effectively become some sort of shadow chicken, shadow egg, whatever it might be? Civic tech is infrastructure for digital and social cohesion. We chip away at this. Donna just talked about some great civic tech that helps with social cohesion from a political standpoint, holding honesty, right, in our hands. But honesty's a tough thing. We'll come to that. But what are data pools? And I'm really interested in finding out how we can have data pools as social mirrors of things like shared priorities and natural rights. What's a natural right? Well, I was talking about it before. I kicked this thing around for a little while, and I reckon it's just simply that to be of reality, you need to be observable. You can be Schrodinger's cat in a box, alive or dead, but you're still observable from the boundary condition of what's communicable about that situation, about that apparatus. So it doesn't matter that the cat's alive or dead, it's that the cat is situated. So it's observable, communicable, and it's subject to externalities, which is the system dynamic, right? The geometry of optimism, let's say. So these natural rights are important, but we're social creatures and we're pretty fallible and we're pretty annoying when we get together and we don't really know each other and we want to convince each other of things. And then we use techniques like technology or key messages, unique selling points, all these ways to penetrate and get not necessarily shared understanding, but to aggressively assault people and have them become embedded with your understanding or your version of understanding. But anyway, this is all stuff we have to challenge ourselves with. I did it. Framing the future of open systems. This is another thing I'm really interested in. Citizen-centric approaches to this. Community-led experimentation. When I mean experiments, I mean we are the apparatus. The data that is emergent from our co-constructive activities becomes part of what open systems are. And I think there's an importance of long-term verifiable transparency, honesty, which gets to Openness, right? And in all of this, there's a really important thing that comes around from growth, structure, and meaningful selection. How do we grow our collective actions? How do we keep coherent around our collective actions? And then how do we keep those acts and that coherence selectively moving on a shared purpose, a shared challenge, or a shared goal, and be meaningfully selecting together? So how do we grow? How does it occur without chaos? How does entropy not win the day? How do we structure without rigidity? How do we not have authoritative doctrines or dogma that enforce structure rather than emerge the conditions for structure? And can meaning arise without control? So there's a question I had for a long time. I've been working on this in my mind since 2018 at least, when I came across constructor theory by David Deutsch. It came out of a revelation, a thought, some sort of model where I thought system dynamics must be stratified. There must be some sort of model by which the probability of getting to a different system, a different energy state, is really not practical, probable, or realistic, because there's a stratification in the substrates. And I went looking for it because it didn't sound like a novel thought, and I found constructor theory. It's a way of procedurally understanding things where you don't have to have a manifold. You don't need to know all the starting conditions or the ending conditions. You can just talk about within this substrate, which has attributes, what things are possible, what things are impossible. And then you could talk about constructors and say, well, if we add these different constructors into the substrate, how would they define and construct the ability for some things to be more possible rather than impossible. So I had these questions, and I had one in particular, which is how do dynamic social systems resolve energy, probability, state, matter, and everything all at once? And, you know, the real thing is, what is trust? Where's the hope and where are the clues? So I don't have an agenda, I just have a hope and a clue. We have a lot of problems with trust at the moment. I spoke about this in 2013, about the architecture of trust. About a year ago, I woke up with really bad gut feels about the world. And you might wonder why. About a year ago, something started to happen, or something got kicked into action. And trust started to get more conversationally, socially engineered into the nomenclature of like every discourse. How do we have social cohesion? How do we restore trust? How do government agencies have citizens trust that they're doing the right thing? And I just thought, I remember thinking about back in the late 60s and love. And love was not scalable. Love was very difficult, even though people might have had all the best intentions to come together, have communes, and share thoughts and share ideas and share work. It was very hard to organize resources with love. It doesn't really connect. It's not really interoperable. And I was thinking a lot about trust. I'm thinking, trust is just like that. It's a human thing. It's something that's earned, it's causally, historically, part of a system dynamic. It's not something we can just like do a marketing campaign for. So I was trying to work this out. There's a coin in flight. This is where I wanted to sort of think about trust in a different way. If you have a coin in flight, it's going to be heads or tails. Like we all know that. Epistemology. Lands on the desk, you put your hand straight over it. It's got von Neumann entropy. And von Neumann sounds kind of cool, right? So it's either a heads or a tails. It's kind of both until you're able to know what it is. And I was thinking, well, isn't that how we operate? Don't we operate on this deferred coherent model where we all know it could be heads or tails? Some of us will be going, well, I'm pretty much sure it's going to be heads, and so I'm going to spin a bottle. Another mob, they're going to roll the dice because they think it's going to be tails. And we keep moving forward. Trust is the ability to defer and create coherent, social, practical, resource decisive models of operating. Because the cost of verifiable honesty is just huge. You can't constantly verify if someone's being honest. You must understand that there's a sort of a trust-based model. That's our human condition. That's our biological cadence for trust. So I started to think about how do we replicate this in, I don't know, something like stuff like tech that I like to do. And I was thinking, well, you want to be able to kind of look like a faith-based system. You know that there are good actors and there are bad actors. You know there's going to be moral type decisions. But ultimately, people who are going to act in a system, such as a social system, they need to have a statement of intent. Without a statement of intent, you've got no baseline by which to understand, are they moving through the substrate? Are they doing things right? We don't need to know if they're doing things right. We just need to, in that sort of faith-based way of saying, if fate comes to get them, there's a reformation coming. There's something that will be causally effective to them because they said they were going to do something, and then 6 years later, we find out they were never doing it, and so there needs to be this sort of fate that comes to them. They either go to heaven or hell. Now, these are all just words I throw around because I was trying to take away my own nomenclature of how I think about these things and reinstall a new one. But it made a lot of sense. So the coin in flight, I kept on thinking, well, this is where something like this should happen, right? You end up with an emergent ground state configuration between system dynamics. And this is just normal causal set theory. Causal set theory, you've got this integral path problem where how do you create manifold type realities? How do they emergently, coherently become manifold realities? And so the first term, this is just the stationary action principle. So you're kind of looking for zero between two systems. You have actions, this is the first term. You have linkages or connections, which is like in a social system, that's in like a home domestic sort of situation. That's like metabolic offloading. Two spouses looking after kids. You're kind of sharing the linked connectivity, obligations, all that kind of stuff. And you can get more actions. But beyond that, there's a selection term. The selection term is the meaningfulness, and it's part of the causal history. So the more you can extend that, and the more that you can enrich that, and the more you can have optimisms within that, the more that term becomes more powerful in this sort of configuration of system dynamics. So anyway, that was the thing I was trying to crack on with. And this guy, where is he? There he is. Put your hat on. Carlos. Open Source Institute, one of the event sponsors of today, so more applause to him. I just asked him a question. I happened to catch up with him a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to get that answer. How do dynamic systems resolve energy, probability, state, matter? And basically he just said, well, it's all about time. I want you to understand time. Now, it's not, but he's a quantum physicist type guy, and I'm like, cool. That's a cool thing to say. And so I spent a lot more time thinking about it, trying to work it out. And I haven't really worked it out. I just think I have. And I haven't really worked it out because it doesn't matter what I think. It's all about you, right? I don't have a horse in this race. We're all in the same race. So those three terms, time, well, acts, right? Actions, causal actions, linkages, and meaningful selections. 2015, I bought this domain, opendata.ai. Someone recently tried to buy it off me for $50,000 US, and I'm like, yeah, right. Because I know how important that domain is. So earlier this last year, before all this happened, I was trying to work out how can I make this be the thing that connects the causal past of me being bigly about open data, caring a lot about it, and the world not going in a space where no one cares about open data. I wanted to try and fix that problem. So in the end of it, there's this objective observer initiative, another cause, another thing. But yeah, it's the thing I'm trying to pull together. I'm not here to recruit people, I'm just here to talk about it. One of the things is there's no social engineering. It's kind of like Fight Club. But I can be a social engineer as long as that's my statement of intent. So it's all about being observable, communicable, and, well, interoperable with the externalities. The first experiment, the first kind of platform experiment that we want to build, so Link Digital is doing the real work, I'm just talking about it and mucking around with stuff, is about time, recapturing time. So what I want to do is say, what is the biological cadence that we're missing? I think there's a glitch going on where causal actors can influence the way we think, act, select. And our information systems, our media, a lot of shared understanding is no different to shared ignorance. And the way in which that could be hitting us, we can't really buffet it out. We can't really stop it. So the concept of consensus, biological consensus, group consensus, communal consensus, is not at all factored in. I want to recreate a sense of time, a cadence, that is based on people actually observing time. And then we can engineer products around that. Experiments that go on with the time-based experiments. So the first one is just basically, it's an iWatch. I just thought go for that, why not? Silicon Valley-esque. If you look at it, there's like 1,440 minutes in a 24-hour cycle. So if you look at it, if the minute hasn't been captured yet, it just shows you a QR code. You're meant to use your phone, capture it. As soon as you've done that, you get the opportunity to take a photo. There's no ability to buffer this. There's no ability to take a second photo. All the licensing will be like, take photos at your own will, own peril, whatever it might be. But once it's captured, that's it. There's no more ability to capture that minute. So you go from this to this. There'll be some pretty pictures. You'll be able to change some filters. But it's a data set. The idea is that the more people start to reconstruct time, the data set that comes from it is going to be a new set of cadences. It's the kind of intentful data set that really only the big info corps have. The Facebooks, the Googles, the whatever. They know how people intend to do things. They know how to marry that intent to time And they know how that connection is associated with those times and those intents as well. But we don't know that. It's not a shared understanding. So my idea is basically reconstruct time, make it a public asset, make it publicly available, make it interoperable, make the ability for people to create more time-based experiments that are actually based on biological acts that people opt into, that is consent aware. That's what the Objective Observer Initiative is about. There's a lot of triangulation. So there's a social experience. This is where you put your statement of intent, you become a coder or whatever it might be. You might have reasons why you want to do it. You want to make money, sure thing, it doesn't matter. But you put it all in the social experience in opendata.ly. All the code goes in opendata.ai. The code is just basically infrastructure, it's like public infrastructure. The third part is the code experience. There'll be GitHub repos. There'll be like a normal, like my experience with CCAN as a tech team. Even though I'm involved in CCAN as an open source project, so I have for a long time, the tech team really runs it. I'm just window dressing. I evangelize it, I endorse it. I have a company that is part of the engine that feeds it. But really, it's the tech team that drives it. And the Objective Observer Initiative is going to have the exact same thing. So, the three experiments. One is to recapture time. The second is to recapture space. And the main thing about recapturing space is, well, we're doing it all wrong. We're doing this democracy thing, which is totally cool, totally really good. But the Dunbar limit sets us at maybe 150 people that we can have a good social connection with and understand what's going on. And I'm thinking the first space type experiment is going to be based on Fibonacci spanning tree groupings. So one person has a good idea, they convince one other person, you got two. Amongst those two, they just agree, hey, you can rep this idea. That's all I have to do. And that rep will kind of find another group, it might be three, right? So you go from 2 to 3, 5 to 8. The whole Fibonacci sequence, which is 44 spanning tree connections you get with 1.2 billion people in a network. So one good idea by one person who becomes the rep for that idea across 44 managed agreements, revocable agreements, agreements that they're accountable for to the extent that the acts that they perform are verifiably honest. Not totally auditable all the time, but verifiably honest. They don't manage each one of those 44 groups to get to. Those groups have their own internal structure, have their own internal structures, right? And you can have a multivariant groupings within a structure like that. The third one is meaning. Well, what's meaning? Well, I kind of laid it out already. Statements of intent. They have causal effect over acts. They have linkages that are persistent, that are based on agreements. But if you have a knowledge graph that's based on someone's statement of intent, and that knowledge graph can be discernible by AI tools. One of the things that AI can do is it can know things. It is not is things, it can know things. And it's much easier to find a bit of knowledge than it is to construct the knowledge of the thing that the knowledge is about. That's like the, P is not equal NP sort of thing. So meaning can be discernibly dissected from statements of intent. What would we do? Well, we'd make recommendations. You intend to do this? There's 27,000 other people who intend to do that. Why don't you form a spanning tree agreement with them and you kind of get active? The reformation that would occur if someone was not doing what they're intending to do can become orchestrated. We can orchestrate the dynamic inversions or recreations of environments or spanning tree networks. But importantly, people can self-select what kind of cadence by which they're going to have consensus, because there's time-based experiments. And those time-based experiments will be available to everyone. All of these would be the triadic sort of like data set that would support the Objective Observer Initiative. Who's with me so far? It's a lot of words, right? The problem is I've been talking about this for a year. This causal set stuff was 26th of July. I sort of like, dude, you're all going to pay attention. But it takes time. It takes time for you to really get confidence. And folks might know in the open world, it's easier to be vulnerable than it is to be closed and let your ego drive, right? But when no one's there believing you, you're not doing the same as everyone else, you really do need to have ego. You have to inject it in. It's not natural for me, so I have to put it out there and I have to talk about it just to correct myself. But the 12 months of causal history behind this initiative, like I said, 20th of January or 21st here in Australia, I woke up and everything could be lost. It's not looking good. But everything must remain. We must reconstruct it because I've got a business, I've got staff, I've got clients. It could all just whittle away, right? And then I was thinking, no, it needs to be built stronger. This could be an opportunity. Let's be optimistic about it, not pessimistic. So everything would be co-constructed. Let's make sure it's a much more open, cohesive society that comes after the fall or after the gut-wrenching period that we're going through. So open data AI, objective observer infrastructure, open data links, spoke about that. Personas, my Stalin persona is me. That's me publishing with my statements of intent on open data link. Link Digital only joined my company when I finally had enough guts to sort of take it to the company. Say, no, we're actually doing it. I'm not just going to keep talking about it like a madman. So they're on board since November. This work today is published under Link Digital. Emergent constructs. I've been publishing things on Medium, LinkedIn, just to sort of test to see what's going on. The model itself, Global Data Barometer and GovHack submissions, I got sort of some fun applying this thinking into those hackathons. Block builds, the idea that I would make myself available for 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week at specific times, not for any purpose, but just to be available as a block of time, such that should others have a similar statement of intent and they want to build with me at the same time to cohere with that kind of activity, then upon that you can build a co-constructive set of activities. So not enforce people to go through a particular kind of induction, but just let them be open as a starting point. Spooky physics, a shared understanding. This is the second sort of presentation on this. I did one in November last year. It was like a panel. It talked about some of this, but it didn't cover all of it. Superfluidity glitch is I guess it's going to turn into a book or something like that, that I did since December. There's a lot of articles in there that I'm trying to stitch together the idea of what the emergent ground state configuration is, what it means to have information systems that work at the speed of light, but biological systems that work at the speed of breakfast, and what that glitch is, what the slippage is. Then there's the geometry of optimism that came somewhere between the 14th and 21st of December. Meditations, that's the last thing for today. But that's today. So it's number theory. I thought, it's all well and good to talk about this stuff and kind of evangelize and think you've got something going on. But where's the smoking gun? What would I be able to do to convince a group of people like this that this isn't all just like, flapping around? It's not just a bit of clocking. So I wanted to build something around number theory. I thought if we were in this von Neumann auricular automata, everything is scale invariant. Everything is computationally computed, causal dynamics, immediately, all the time, everywhere, all at once. So if you create an ontological construct, a thought experiment, you might say, but it has coherence and you're orthogonal to it, and you have two systems, one's a constructor and one is the structure, and you put your conjecture in there, you inject your conjecture into the system, then you might find out what is reality. What's the remainder after that system's run? So that's what this triadic architecture attempts to do. Module 1 is about grounding the epistemic conjecture in architecture. It's like routing dynamics. The rules. Module 2 is grounding the structural causal dynamic, which is basically the impulse that goes from cause to effect or cause to structure. And then module 3 is basically grounding the epistemic remainder, which that means I've got the epistemic a priori. I'm the one who's injected the whole idea of those two systems, so I have to remain an observer. I have to remain observable, communicable, and subject to the externalities. So that epistemic remainder is really important. What happens? And what it falls out of it, this is about prime number theory, if you haven't like number theory. Buffered primes are coins in flight. Theoretically, they exist. So 4, 5, 6, 7 all theoretically exist. They meaningfully exist, but they only exist because we're orthogonal to them, because we've constructed a society that counts things beyond 3. Really, there's no number beyond 3. There's only triangulation. And that's what I claim to have demonstrated with code and data and all that kind of stuff. But I'm subject to externalities. And like I said, suspend belief just as much as you suspend disbelief, because this is just fun, I reckon. So everything is the construct. I've put everything from today up. The kind of stuff that I built, this is like the causal dynamics of two pentagonal systems that are all like in equilibrium. This is the same sort of one once I realized you didn't necessarily need the geometries, that you might just be able to eject a radius. A lot of this is about having the construct being orthogonal such that there's only one impulse that can go to the structure. So it's like simulating an idea of entanglement between the two systems. But the entanglement can lose coherence because there's an actual aperture on that plane. You have to look at the code, look at some of the other stuff to get it. It's too much. This is this is basically the causal dynamics of one engine to another. I was just trying to calibrate how would you have, you know, this like zeroing out so that there's true entanglement between the systems. This is kind of what it looks like in 3D, just to give you an idea. So it's like two pentagonal sort of like constructs. A lot of this is about rotational inertia, so that I can get to my epistemic conjecture and still have some ability to do things like spin dynamics. What you're seeing there in the purple or the magenta is basically the number 2 being created in the structural side, and the square is representing 2 by 2, which is the injection of impulse at that particular moment on the structural side. What this tells us, well, if you suspend your disbelief for a bit, what happens if there's a blackout from the causal side to the structural side? What happens when the impulses from the causal side don't actually impact on the structural side? And the deviation from true causal history, when there's perfect dynamics, perfect coherence entanglement, is really measurable. It's interesting. Even from 0 to 100 ticks on the causal side, if you just suppress that 50 to 100, 51 to 100, that's the kind of drift you get just in that sort of like first 500 ticks. It corrects back up again. It's all logarithmic stuff, right? But open, optimistic, and computable, the hidden geometry of the real. There's pictures. I've worked out very quickly that I actually built a geometric sieve for number theory. I didn't even know what they were, but built one. So you could do a histogram. This is like looking forward. You can then target composites. Like this is a goggle away. And it's just basically using these beams to find out what are the composites for all the primordials up to 29. You can then find out, well, where's the density of these points. Once you look at the routing dynamics, you can actually identify the points where the structure enforces there must be a prime because the routing is condensed. And I call these impulse primes because the prime had to occur to actually rectify the structural problem on the effect side. You can even do like prime walk. So basically, the density of 0 is different based on how much the number line goes to. The 0 is constrained by the number. So if you go to k equals 10,000 and k equals 100, 0 is a very different number, a very different construct. And to illustrate that, I did some prime walks, which is basically, every time there's a prime on the causal side, you have to, or on the structural side, you have to have another angle of attenuation because it can't route. And then you would be able to correct that the other direction. And what happens is it loops back on itself and it comes back to the center and it creates that density in the middle. Every 0 is different. And you can look at the density of zeros over time in their causal structure, their causal history. And you can see there's a It's an angle there. And that's because of the engine that I use, the causal engine that I use. There's a pentagonal, so there's two of them. It ticks in a way that's like 4 to 1. But the point is not that I've discovered anything. The point is if you try and work out what reality is, if you don't understand the epistemic conjecture, then you won't understand there's an epistemic remainder. Once you work it out, you can kind of create these understandings as you as an observer. And one thing I just wanted to show, all the code and data is there, so everyone can like muck around with it. But in what we're seeing here is basically up the top, there's some data there. The bit that's zoomed in is the important bit. In the tick phase, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, through the routing dynamic, bidirectional is it's a resonance, right? So the two systems can resonate correct. It can't happen, or at t equals 3, tick equals 3, it's always readdressable. There's no way to lock down 0 at t equals 3, which just means that in terms of system dynamics, whenever you've got a triadic system, you can always find some point by which you're orthogonal to it. And if you can create a plane of orthogonality so that you're looking at a system dynamic over your causal frame, your objectivity, then you can map onto it causal deference? I don't know, systems. So going back to what is this when you like look at buffered primes. Buffered primes are basically where they haven't grounded in the structure versus when will they ground? What's the lag? What's the computational impedance to when they lag? And what you get is very interesting. You get an unreality versus a reality. And it's 2 to 1, essentially. You also get an illusion of pi, where basically based on the causal horizon, the number of observers, you get closer and closer to pi, and it's emergent from the system. Just on the tension between the lag and the structure. Causal charge. So remember that egg, positive, negative? What happens if it can't ground? It's kind of like a causal inversion that comes back at you. Well, the mass of that in the system dynamic is very close to the electron ideal. You know, the first sort of like emergent thingamajig that comes from quantum. It's pretty cool, it's pretty fun. So again, things like the discreteness of fluidity, the mass gap, you can kind of start to have a way of thinking about this. So the triadic architecture of meditations, the documentation, and I'll finish here, I'm sorry. There's a chicken. For anyone who wants to, come along to the block build on Sunday. I'm not looking for friends. On here, I'll have block builds. I'll publish another series of them. But every Sunday, probably from 6 to 8 a.m. or 7 till 9 a.m. And I do one on Fridays before a meeting that I usually have at 7 a.m. All I wanted to do is say in the documentation, this live document. This is open for comments. The first page has all the stuff that's open for comments. It's got an explanation of all the modules. It makes some big, bold claims, and I'm very much open to the externalities of people telling me how crazy I am, because that's fun. It's even got the Millennium Prizes. So there's 6 Millennium Prizes worth $1 million if you can give them a mathematical proof. I had a crack at all 6, why not? Because it's fun, right? All right, who wants it? I'm done. You get it. Woohoo! All right, thanks, folks.